Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 8 Part 22 based on novel. So let's start. The resplendent bizarre light beam swept across the horizon and smashed into the Yuan Kang trio's bodies under uncountable watching gazes. Everyone seemed to see a terrified expression appearing on the faces of the trio at the moment of impact. The Yuan Kang trio's gaze pierced through the resplendent light beam and stared unwaveringly at the skinny figure that was only a dozen feet away. In their eyes, there was fear, and also dissatisfaction. Moreover, there was also some disbelief. Even at this time, they were still unable to believe that all their Yuan Gate elite disciples would actually be annihilated by a single person, Lin Dong. Yuan Gate disciples, complete annihilation. Such ruthlessness had surpassed even the Dao sect's Ju Tong from back then. The trio's gazes intertwined at the very last moment. All of them saw regret in each other's eyes. If they knew beforehand that Lin Dong would be this savage, they would not have pressed the Dao sect so hard. Who could imagine that this seemingly good-natured fellow would actually be this frightening when he went crazy? A miscalculation. A voice that was filled with dissatisfaction slowly echoed. Quickly after, the sight before the trio's eyes quickly turned to darkness, as their bodies also rapidly disappeared under the disintegration light beams. Buzz buzz. The incomparably large formation in the sky began to tremble as it faded. Finally, the bright light completely scattered, along with the bodies of the Yuan Gate's three little kings. This entire place became completely silent as everyone gazed at the now empty space. No one dared to breathe too loudly at this moment. Their eyes were dull as they looked in the direction where the Yuan Gate disciples had been. Of the huge black mass of people that were originally there, none were left. There were 537 Yuan Gate disciples. Plus the Yuan Kang trio, their numbers made up 540. Yet, at this moment, none of them had survived. They were completely annihilated. Although the rocky ground was currently not littered with corpses, nor did blood flow like rivers, everyone could still sense a chill spreading out from this place. This chill entered from the bottom of their feet and charged directly towards their heads. This person was too ruthless. Many gazes gathered towards the blood-soaked figure in the sky, and their scalps could not help but feel somewhat numb. The great sect competition had been held many times. Although a great battle would occur during each competition, there was not a single instance where all the elite disciples of a sect were completely exterminated. Not only did this require extreme ruthlessness, but it also required an extremely frightening strength. Such strength had not been achieved by even the exceptional genius from the Dao sect, Ju Tong, when he had participated in the great sect competition back then. Now, however, it had been accomplished by Lin Dong. This time around, Yuan Gate will truly go crazy, Wu Kun breathed in deeply, suppressing the great shock in his heart. His complexion was currently a little pale. Clearly, he had been frightened by Lin Dong's tactics. Upon hearing this, the surrounding 9 Heaven Supreme Purity Palace disciples deeply nodded in agreement. Those who could participate in the great sect competition were basically elite disciples. Yet, all of these disciples were now lost. It was likely that Yuan Gate would feel great pain even with their foundation. The great sect competition is originally not meant for sparing. Instead, it is a life and death experience. Any incident that occurs within it is fair. In past great sect competitions, the losses suffered by the Dao sect disciples were also quite severe. The last competition, even that great senior sister of the Sky Hall was surrounded and killed by the Yuan Gate disciples. The reason these Yuan Gate disciples act in such a domineering manner is also because they could rely on the rules of the competition, hence causing the furious Dao sect to have no choice but to grit their teeth and swallow their anger. Ling Qingzhu softly continued, however, it is likely that Yuan Gate will never have imagined that they would completely repay all their past debts this time around. From today onwards, perhaps the name of the strongest amongst the younger generation of the Eastern Xian region will belong to Lin Dong. Wu Kun sighed and nodded. He knew that those who had witnessed this desperate great battle today would no longer dare to have any intention of challenging Lin Dong. The number one amongst the younger generation was indeed a deserving title. However, although it is perfectly reasonable for Lin Dong to be so ruthless due to the rules of the competition, it is likely that, given their style, Yuan Gate will not take this lying down. This matter is not considered over. Ling Qingzhu muttered to herself. After which, she had a complicated look in her eyes as she looked towards the figure in the sky, whose entire body was giving off desperation. This person truly intended to turn the Eastern Xian region upside down. The light in the sky finally disappeared completely, while Lin Dong's body staggered a little. Weakness and fatigue that could not be described frantically spread out from his limbs and bones, causing his vision to start turning black. Buzz. Lin Dong suddenly heard a buzzing sound from the sky to his front while his vision was gradually turning dim. He weakly blinked his eyes, only to see an emblem flickering with light suspended at that spot. Waves of extremely majestic ripples were being emitted while the light flickered. Spirit emblem? Lin Dong gazed at the emblem that contained an extremely majestic energy. His weak spirit violently trembled. This spirit emblem was evidently left behind by Yuan Kang. The disintegration power had turned Yuan Kang into nothingness, yet this spirit emblem had been left behind. Lin Dong's astonishment only lasted for a split second. Subsequently, he abruptly extended his hand abruptly and grabbed the spirit emblem. Of course, his speed might be quick, but it was still seen by many people. Surprisingly, however, those present were actually unable to summon even the slightest courage to snatch the spirit emblem, despite being faced with such a rare and unique treasure. It was clear that Lin Dong's previous display still lingered in their eyes. Lin Dong's strength seemed to have become completely spent after the spirit emblem entered his hand. The sight before his eyes swiftly started to turn black, as his body directly fell towards the ground. From the looks of it, he was at his weakest. Swoosh! Ying Huan's lovely body moved when she saw the situation from the ground. She hurried into the air and supported Lin Dong, who was so weak that he was about to faint. She gazed at that dried-up figure of Lin Dong that was dyed red by blood, as her large eyes involuntarily turned red. Her long and beautiful hand contained some iciness as it wiped at the blood on Lin Dong's face. With red eyes, she said, "You are really too reckless." "Ha ha. I have promised sect leader to protect all of you, however, we have still lost so many seniors and juniors." Lin Dong's body was practically completely leaning on the gentle and soft figure of the young lady as he mumbled with closed eyes. "Wait for me to wake up before leaving the unique devil region." Before he completely lost consciousness, Lin Dong's weak voice transmitted into Ying Huan's ears. After which, his mind fully descended into darkness. "Idiot, you have already done very well." Ying Huan looked at the young face that was filled with fatigue. Those large eyes of hers flashed with an exceptionally gentle expression. She quickly carried Lin Dong and slowly landed from the sky. Soon after, the Dao sect disciples came surging over like floodwaters. Wang Yang watched the Dao sect disciples rush over in an almost crazy manner as he shook his head. That usually emotionless face of his currently possessed an extremely ugly smile. This fellow is truly terrifying. The Yuan Gate disciples had been completely annihilated. This clearly caused Wang Yang to feel extremely joyous. Every great sect competition, the Dao sect disciples would suffer great losses after being pressed by the Yuan Gate disciples. They had held back this anger for so many years. Now, however, they had managed to take revenge. "Senior Sister Xiao Xiao, what should we do now?" Qingyi gazed at the unconscious Lin Dong, before looking towards Ying Xiao Xiao as he asked. This great sect competition had finally come to a close. This spot was quite close to the teleporting formation. If they wished, they would be able to leave this place within a day. However, leaving might be easy, but once they left the unique devil region, all of them were aware that the entire Eastern Xian region would likely fall into an uproar because of this incident. The oncoming storm was even more frightening than the battle here. Ying Xiao Xiao knitted her brows. She was similarly aware of the commotion that would be stirred when word of this matter spread. However, this was unavoidable. Lin Dong said to wait for him to awaken before leaving the unique devil region. By the side, Ying Huan softly stated. Ying Xiao Xiao pondered for a moment after hearing this. She subsequently nodded. It seemed that Lin Dong was also clearly aware of just what a frightening thing he had done. Once this matter spread, Yuan Gate would definitely go crazy. Although he had the rules of the Great Sect competition as protection, no one could guarantee that Yuan Gate would not take any action. Hence, Lin Dong must be awake when he left the unique devil region. Moreover, he also needed to have recovered his fighting strength. All disciples, stay and rest here. We will wait for Lin Dong to awaken. Ying Xiaoxiao was also decisive. She immediately issued her order. None of the numerous Dao sect disciples had any objections when they heard this. After which, the huge group sat on the ground, forming a circular shape that protected Lin Dong in the middle. It seems that the Dao sect disciples do not plan to leave immediately, Wu Kun commented when he saw this. This is because they will face an even greater storm once they leave the unique devil region. Lin Dong has an extremely cautious character. He will definitely not allow himself to be in such a dangerous situation while in a weakened state. Ling Qingzhu hesitated for a moment. After which, she beckoned with her hand and a jade bottle appeared within it. This jade bottle subsequently turned into a ray of light that shot towards the distant Ying Xiaoxiao. Oh! Ying Xiaoxiao received the jade bottle and was slightly startled. She lifted her head and looked at the far-off Ling Qingzhu. This is the clear jade saliva of the Nine Heaven Supreme Purity Palace. It will be of some use to his injuries. Ling Qingzhu's faint voice was transmitted over from a distance. Thank you. Ying Xiaoxiao clearly did not expect that Ling Qingzhu would actually take the initiative to lend a hand. However, she did not reject the offer. After keeping the jade bottle, she nodded towards Ling Qingzhu and thanked her. All of you, tell him to be careful when he leaves the unique devil region. Ling Qingzhu softly said. Without further ado, she turned around and led the large group of Nine Heaven Supreme Purity Palace disciples to fly away. After the Nine Heaven Supreme Purity Palace disciples left, the remaining super sects also began to leave. One could imagine that they would bring news of this out, and in the end, it would shake the entire Eastern Xian region. With the Great Sect competition slowly coming to a close, the various factions also began to leave the unique devil region one after another. Sure enough, as people left, the events that had occurred in unique devil region also frantically spread like wildfire. Yuan Gate disciples, completely annihilated. The face of anyone who had learnt of this news would definitely be filled with shock and disbelief. Yuan Gate was the strongest super sect in the Eastern Xian region, and its disciples were usually the elite amongst the younger generation of the Eastern Xian region. Every batch of 3 little kings from Yuan Gate would have difficulty finding an opponent who could match them amongst the younger generation of the Eastern Xian region. However, during this Great Sect competition, not only were the Yuan Gate 3 little kings killed, but even the 500 over Yuan Gate elite disciples were unable to walk out alive from the unique devil region. Just what had happened within the unique devil region? News spread in a crazy manner. Soon, the answer to that question also spread. Everyone became slack-jawed when they heard about the mastermind behind it. The expected situation where a couple of great sects joined hands to deal with the Yuan Gate disciples did not occur. Neither was there the expected huge-scale chaotic battle between disciples. A single person had fought against all the Yuan Gate disciples alone, and completely massacred them in the end. Dao sect's Lin Dong. In a short night, this name had swept across the entire Eastern Xian region at a terrifying speed. This person is truly a monster. This was the only thought everyone had after hearing the news. They were really unable to understand how it was possible for Lin Dong to defeat not only the Yuan Gate 3 little kings, but also finish off such a quantity of Yuan Gate disciples with just his power alone. This was not something that a single person could achieve. While many people were shocked by this news, some of the sharper individuals began to sense the subsequent brewing storm. Although the disciples from the various sects would ultimately suffer some losses during each great sect competition, there had never been an incident of losing every single disciple. Moreover, the main characters of this incident were the Yuan Gate disciples. As the strongest sect on the Eastern Xian region, this matter would undoubtedly completely trigger the Yuan Gate's fury. While no one needed to be responsible for any deaths or injuries during the Great Sect competition, given the Yuan Gate style, How was it possible for them to swallow such a bitter pill alone? The loss of hundreds of elite disciples was like cutting off the Yuan Gate's flesh despite its great foundation. Hence, after receiving this shocking news, some of the more sensitive individuals could sense that an even more terrifying storm was brewing. The teleportation formation within the unique Devil region led to unique Devil City. Hence, this place became the source of the information. The liveliness of the city had once again soared. The battle between Lindong and the Yuan Gate disciples had undoubtedly become the topic of greatest interest in the city. Due to this being the location where the disciples returned to, the various super sect group leaders did not leave unique Devil City. Instead, they quietly waited for the disciples from their respective sects to return. Obviously, the Yuan Gate group leaders were amongst them. However, their wait did not lead to the usual news of success. Instead, they ended up receiving news that caused all of them to feel dizzy. Yuan Gate disciples, completely annihilated. While the news spread, the unique Devil City was in an uproar over it. Countless pairs of eyes were also cast towards the location where the Yuan Gate residence was in the city. They could imagine that all hell had broken out in that place. Bang! In a large hall with a heavy atmosphere, a solid wooden table was suddenly turned to dust by the slam of a palm. The roar of an elder with ferocious expression and scarlet-red eyes thundered across the hall. Completely annihilated? Can someone tell me just what is going on? How can that little bastard called Lindong from the Dao sect possess such capability? At this moment, there were about a dozen Yuan Gate upper echelon in the hall. There were 6 elders amongst them whose faces were filled with extreme rage. They were the ones leading the Yuan Gate team this time around. At the same time, they were also section heads of the Yuan Gate's 8 sections, which was equivalent to the 4 hall chiefs of the Dao sect's 4 halls. Each of them was at the advanced profound life stage. That little bastard must have employed some kind of dirty methods. Otherwise, how can he possibly be a match for Yuan Kan? Even someone as fierce as Ju Tong from back then was unable to cause our Yuan Gate disciples to suffer such losses. Another elder also spoke with a somewhat twisted face. That brat, just what is his background? Isn't the strongest disciple from Dao sect Ying Xiao Xiao? Where did this Lindong come from? Another elder asked in a dark voice. The remaining people were at a loss upon hearing these words. Lindong's strength was not considered outstanding amongst the Dao sect disciples. Who would pay attention to him for no reason? So Liu Yu, this Lindong, is the champion of the 100 Empire War a year ago. However, he did not choose to join our Yuan Gate in the end and had instead went to the Dao sect. A person in the large hall suddenly replied carefully. What? He already possesses such ability after having joined the Dao sect for a mere year? Liu Tong, how did you make your selection back then? You actually allowed such a person to join the Dao sect? The elder from earlier shouted sternly. His face immediately turned cold when he heard this. The person who had replied trembled for a moment when he heard the stern shout. He lifted his head and revealed a face filled with bitterness. Surprisingly, he was that Liu Tong, who had went to the 100 Empire Mountain to choose disciples back then. Sir, that little brat seems to be very resistant to our Yuan Gate. I had spent a lot of effort to convince him, but he still refused to join. Liu Tong answered with a bitter smile. He was really unable to imagine that the young man, who was nothing in his eyes a year ago, would actually completely annihilate their Yuan Gate disciples in the great sect competition a year later. Disgraceful bastard. If you are unable to pull such a person to our side, you should find an opportunity to dispose of him. Are you stupid? An elder cried out in fury. Liu Tong felt like a late autumn cicada that could not chirp as he hurriedly agreed. He was aware that these people were currently not in the right state of mind due to anger. Should they be displeased, it was likely that they would even attack. It is pointless to be angry now. Everyone, how should we handle this matter? An elder with an ice-cold expression waved his hand and spoke in a deep voice. Our Yuan Gate disciples are not people that can be killed so easily. We cannot let off Lindong off so easily. A person spoke with a dark tone. However, the great sect competition has its rules. If we are to take action, we will be breaking the rules. It is likely that the Dao sect will not sit back and do nothing. Those few hall chiefs from the Dao sect are still waiting here after all. So what if the four of them are here? Don't tell me our Yuan Gate disciples should just die for no reason. That's right. We must definitely make that brat pay with his life. Otherwise, what dignity will our Yuan Gate possess in the future? Furious noises spread and echoed within the large hall, as murder was revealed in each and every one of these Yuan Gate upper echelons' eyes. In the end, they came to a decision. They would first send this news back to the sect, while they would quietly wait for the Dao sect disciples to exit here. No matter what, they absolutely would not easily let off that brat called Lin Dong. While the Yuan Gate's upper echelon argued until their faces turned red, the atmosphere within a guest room in which the Dao sect disciples occupied in unique Devil City was a little strange. For people were seated within, while their hands gently stroked the back of their chairs. It was a long time before the Sky Hall Master, Chi Lei, at the leader's seat, finally adjusted his state of mind and slowly said, "That news, have you all heard of it?" Chen Zhen and the other two Hall Masters exchanged glances with each other. Soon after, they nodded with complicated expressions and said, "This news is a little shocking." God damn it. Chi Lei's hand slammed heavily onto the table, as a curse involuntarily erupted from his mouth. This little brat Lin Dong, just how the hell did he do it? How could he have not only killed the 3 little Yuan kings, but also murdered those 500 over Yuan Gate disciples all by himself? The Chen Zhen trio looked at each other. They shook their heads and pondered for a while before replying, "This matter, it does feel rather great." The expressions of the 3 of them were all quite grave. However, these subsequent words caused their grave expressions to become extremely strange. It might feel great, these Yuan Gate bastards have killed so many of our Dao sect disciples. It is not the least bit excessive to kill all of them this time around. Chi Lei nodded earnestly as he said. Asterisk cough asterisk. Chen Zhen coughed softly. From the looks of it, if he did not issue a reminder, they would continue getting entangled on the question about whether it felt great. However, those Yuan Gate bastards will likely not let this matter rest, the Earth Hall Master, Xie Yang, remarked. Humph, one's life or death does not matter in the Great Sect competition. Just how many of our Dao sect disciples have been killed at the Yuan Gate's hands in past Great Sect competitions? Lin Dong did not go the least bit overboard. If their Yuan Gate dares to use this as a reason, our Dao sect will accompany them until the end. The Flood Hall Master, Zhu Shan, snorted coldly. Chi Lei narrowed his eyes. He pondered for a moment before speaking, "Send this news back to the Dao sect immediately. Tightly monitor the teleportation formation in the city at all times. Once Lin Dong and the rest appear, immediately head over and protect them. I believe that those old fellows from Yuan Gate will not simply leave like this." "Aye?" The Chen Zhen trio nodded heavily when they heard this. A cold glint vaguely flickered in their eyes. However, "Chen Zhen, your desolate hall has really produced an incredible disciple this time." Chi Lei suddenly looked at Chen Zhen. His voice was filled with carefreeness. Even senior Ju Tong from back then was not as domineering as this little fellow. Ha ha. Chen Zhen lifted his head and laughed heartily. On his aged face was unconcealable pride and joy. One day after another passed in unique Devil City. The atmosphere inside the city also became increasingly tense. Everyone knew that the powerful experts from Yuan Gate and Dao Sect had yet to leave. Evidently, the Great Sect competition might be over, but the subsequent matters had only just begun. On the 5th day, within unique Devil region, the young man who had already become the focus of attention for countless people, had finally begun to awaken from his unconscious state. By the time Lin Dong opened his eyes again, what entered them was a slightly dusky sky. He simply watched the sky in this startled fashion, as he allowed the memories in his mind to recover like floodwaters. Senior brother Lin Dong has awakened. However, his peace did not last for long, before an extremely joyous voice suddenly rang out from his surroundings. Soon after, a wave of noise and hurried footsteps were transmitted over. Soon, Lin Dong saw that he was being surrounded and observed by hundreds of people. Lin Dong felt a slight warmth in his heart as he gazed at these Dao sect seniors and juniors with joy and worry on their faces. Soon after, he slowly nodded. The crowd quickly separated as Ying Xiaoxiao, Ying Huanhuan, and a few others hurried over. Joy from being relieved of a large burden immediately gushed out in Ying Huanhuan's beautiful large eyes when she saw the now conscious Lin Dong. However, Lin Dong could still see some hidden tiredness under her joy. You have finally woken up. You have been unconscious for 5 days. If you still showed no signs of waking up, we were planning to carry you back to the Dao sect. Ying Huanhuan squatted down beside Lin Dong and said with a captivating smile. 5 days, huh? Lin Dong smiled and was not surprised. He twisted and stretched his body. The originally exhausted yuan power within it was surging once again. It even faintly seemed to be more abundant than it was in the past. The many injuries on his body had also completely healed. Your body's recovery ability is very strong. However, you lost too much essence blood. It is fortunate that Ling Qingzhu gave us the clear jade saliva. Otherwise, you would not be awake right now. Ying Xiaoxiao commented by the side. Ling Qingzhu. Lin Dong was slightly taken aback. Soon after, he nodded. Of course, Huan has been taking close care of you during these few days. She has not even closed her eyes for 5 days. Ying Xiaoxiao gently smiled and said. Sis. Ying Huan's pretty face blushed a little as she gave Ying Xiaoxiao a rebuking look. This appearance caused some of the surrounding juniors and seniors to laugh in a friendly and envious manner. Thank you. Lin Dong gazed at the slightly red-faced young lady beside him and thanked as he felt a slight warmth in his heart. You have done a meritorious service for our Dao sect. It is only right to take care of you. Moreover, Qingtan is also very worried about you. Ying Huan pointed at Qingtan beside her. At this moment, the other young lady also had slightly red eyes. It was likely that she had been very worried while he was unconscious. Lin Dong stood up. He rubbed Qingtan's small head and laughed. Silly girl. Aren't I fine? It is all because I am useless. I thought that I would be able to help you. Qingtan slowly lowered her head in response to Lin Dong's act of comforting her. She felt a little sad. The reason that she had left home was because she did not wish for Lin Dong to risk his life all alone in a desperate struggle. She had originally believed that the current her was able to help Lin Dong. However, when Lin Dong fought Yuan Kang alone, she discovered that she was still so helpless. Over 2 years of training seemed to be completely useless. I do not need you to stand in front of me. Otherwise, I as an older brother will be too useless, Lin Dong grinned and said, as he gently hugged this sad young lady. Qingtan leaned against Lin Dong's chest. Her small hands involuntarily tightened slowly, as determination flashed across her intelligent eyes. She will no longer skive when training in the future. Brother Chen Gui, many thanks this time. Lin Dong released Qingtan and cupped his hands together towards Chen Gui in a solemn manner. If it was not because Chen Gui had intervened and delayed Yuan Kang, it was likely that the losses suffered by the Dao sect disciples after he arrived would be even more astonishing. Chen Gui hurriedly waved his hands to and fro when he saw this. He now no longer dared to treat this young man before him as an ordinary person. Having exchanged blows with Yuan Kang, Chen Gui was naturally clearly aware just how strong the former was. However, even someone as strong as Yuan Kang was ultimately turned into nothingness at Lin Dong's hands. Additionally, the over 500 elite Yuan Gate disciples who had disappeared along with Yuan Kang. Chen Gui had always believed that he was considered decisive when he chose to kill. However, if he was to compare himself with Lin Dong, he would be akin to a child comparing himself to an adult. At the very least, if he was standing in Lin Dong's position, it was likely that he would have difficulty going so far. Have the others left Unique Devil region? Lin Dong's eyes swept around him. The entire place, which had originally been filled by people, was now empty. Yes. The Great Sect competition is basically over. Hence all the disciples have already left Unique Devil region and returned to Unique Devil City. Ying Xiaoxiao nodded and said. Unique Devil City is likely in an upheaval now. Wang Yang looked at Lin Dong and remarked. Lin Dong nodded. He was naturally clearly aware of what a horrifying thing he had done. The great sect competition had been held so many times, but no one had ever taken things as far as he had, killing every single disciples of a sect. Moreover, it was the most powerful sect in the Eastern Xian region, Yuan Gate. Once we leave Unique Devil region, we will swiftly join up with Martial Uncle Chi Lei and the rest. After that, we will return to the Dao sect. The great sect competition is after all a life and death battle. Yuan Gate will not have any excuse regardless of how great their rage is. Ying Xiao said. Let's go. Lin Dong turned around. His eyes looked into the distance, as the hand within his sleeve slowly tightened. Although he had indeed been a little too vicious, and he was clearly aware that he would become a thorn in the eyes of Yuan Gate by doing this, he had no regrets. If he was given a second chance, he would still unhesitatingly annihilate all the Yuan Gate disciples. Otherwise, wouldn't those Dao sect disciples have died in vain? Lin Dong's figure took the lead and rushed forward after his voice sounded. Soon after, the large group of Dao sect disciples immediately followed. They swept past the sky and hurried towards the far-off teleportation formation. Everyone was clearly aware that there was likely an even greater whirlpool awaiting them there. Unique Devil City. Over this period of time, Unique Devil City was just like a volcano that would erupt at any time, causing the atmosphere within the entire city to be exceptionally explosive. Although the great sect competition was already over, the human traffic within the city had not reduced but had instead become even greater. Even those individuals from the super sects did not show any signs of leaving. It was likely that everyone was clearly aware that it was not completely over yet. A beautiful figure clothed in snow-white clothes stood atop a pavilion at a corner of Unique Devil City, while a pair of clear eyes gazed towards the city center. It was the spot connected to the teleportation formation of Unique Devil region. Senior Sister Qingshu, Big Brother Lin Dong and the rest have yet to come out. Could something have happened? Su Ru asked in a somewhat worried manner from behind Ling Qingshu. Lin Dong's injuries this time are not light. Given his character, he very clearly understands how much trouble he has drawn to himself due to what he has done. Therefore, he will not easily show himself unless he recuperates to his peak condition. Ling Qingshu softly said. Su Ru nodded slightly. Soon after, she glanced at Ling Qingshu and commented, Senior Sister Qingshu, you and Big Brother Lin Dong seem to have a special relationship. Su Ru was after all also a girl, and was more observant. Although Qingshu was cool and aloof to everyone, it was still possible for Su Ru to detect that the former acted a little differently when it came to Lin Dong's situation. Ling Qingshu was also startled by these words from Su Ru. However, her face did not change at all as she replied in an indifferent manner, I met him once in the past. Additionally, he has also helped me when I was searching for the Supreme Purity Celestial Pond in Unique Devil region. Oh? Su Ru nodded and did not inquire any further. Ling Qingshu quietly sighed in relief within her heart when she saw this. Just as she was about to speak, her eyes suddenly focused as her gaze shifted towards the city center. She clenched her jade-like fists tightly as she muttered, the Dao sect disciples have come out. By the side, Su Ru's face turned serious when she heard this. She was clearly aware that the city was currently like a volcano that was waiting to erupt at a certain moment. It was very possible that Lin Dong would be the spark to light the fuse. At the center of Unique Devil City was a tall altar. At the top of this altar was a sparkling formation, and this formation was the one that linked to the teleportation formation in the depths of Unique Devil region. However, this formation only went one way, one could exit but not enter through it. A continuous stream of people exited this teleportation formation over this period of time. However, after the initial huge exodus, those that came later were lone individuals or members of small factions. Hence, they did not stir much of a commotion when they appeared. Of course, although these people who had appeared out from the formation were insignificant, it did not change the fact that this spot had now become the focal point of the entire city. Buzz buzz. At this moment, light suddenly flashed on the altar that had been peaceful for half a day. Initially, not many people bothered about it. However, when they discovered that the flickering of the light was becoming increasingly rapid, several people's expressions began to change. This was because they knew that such a scene would only appear when a large group of people was appearing. Most of the super sect disciples within the unique devil region had already exited. The only ones still remaining were the Dao sect disciples. Are they finally coming out? Several people muttered to themselves. Their eyes possessed some anticipation. All of them very much wanted to see just what kind of monster the young man, who had shook the entire Eastern Xian region, was. The eyes of the entire city shifted over with a swoosh sound, and gathered at the top of the altar. The light finally began to gradually weaken under their gathered gazes. Finally, hundreds of figures appeared from nowhere. The badges on their chest allowed others to confirm their identities. Dao sect disciples. The originally noisy city seemed to have become quiet at this moment. After which, all eyes shot towards the skinny figure right at the front. The latter's serene face totally did not appear like a person who had performed such an astonishing act. In the sky, Lin Dong's expression was calm as he gazed upon the strange atmosphere while both of his fists slowly clenched. Bang bang. At this moment, monstrous auras from within the city began to unfurl like a storm. A dozen figures came rushing over from the distance. At the same time, a roar that was filled with murderous intent also rumbled. You ruthless little bastard. We have waited a long time for you. Return with us to the Yuan Gate to atone for your crimes. The monstrous aura spread apart, and 6 elderly figures with dark expressions flew over, and appeared in the sky above. Atonement? What crime has Lin Dong committed? You old shameless fogies. Do you really think that our Dao sect are a bunch of softies? Go ahead and try us. However, a sneer suddenly erupted from another part of the city when these 6 old men with murderous auras arrived. The figures walked across the air and hovered in the sky. From their appearance they were Ji Lei, Chen Zhen and the other 2 hall masters. Countless individuals in the entire city held their breaths as they watched this scene. As expected, these 2 super sects had clashed. This video will end here.